All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic.
Yeah, definitely.
It's how psychedelics could be working in the brain to combat inflammation, right?
Yeah.
And you are specifically interested in the potential for treating depression
Yeah.
and those neurodegenerative disorders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to help guide us today, we've got a bunch of scientific articles,
Cool.
clinical trial data, and even some lecture notes
Wow.
from Stanford University.
That's great.
So-
What's so cool is that we're moving beyond just looking at the psychological effects of psychedelics.
Right.
And we're really starting to understand how they're impacting us at the cellular level.
Yeah.
It's like we're finally zooming in, on the brain's intricate machinery.
Okay, so we know psychedelics create these very unique experiences.
Yeah.
But what's actually happening behind the scenes?
Right.
Like, let's start with the basics.
Okay.
Receptors.
Okay.
I know they're involved, but how?
Okay, so think of receptors like these tiny little antennas
Okay.
on brain cells,
Okay.
constantly receiving signals,
Oh,
right? Psychedelics, they come in
Yeah.
and they bind to these specific receptors.
Okay.
It's kind of like tuning into a particular radio frequency, right?
Okay.
And so this interaction,
Yeah.
it triggers this whole cascade of events within the cell.
Okay.
And ultimately, it changes how that cell behaves.
So it's not just about the trip.
Right.
It's about the very specific ways these substances
Right.
interact with our brain cells.
Exactly.
But we're talking about inflammation, and I'm not quite seeing the connection yet.
Okay, well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So one of the key players in all of this is the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor subtype. It's
Right.
like a master conductor, orchestrating the brain's whole inflammatory response.
The 5-HT2A receptor, got it.
Right.
So psychedelics bind to this receptor,
Yeah.
and that somehow influences inflammation.
Did that?
But how do we go from, like, a psychedelic experience to actually calming down inflammation?
Okay, to understand that we need to bring in another important piece of the puzzle,
Okay.
and that is microglia.
Okay.
They are the brain's resident immune cells,
Okay.
and they're constantly patrolling, keeping everything in check.
The brain's own cleanup crew.
Yes.
I love it.
Right. I imagine them as these tiny little robots just
Yeah.
zipping around and removing debris.
Yeah.
And when they encounter a threat, like let's say an injury or an infection, they release inflammatory molecules called cytokines.
Okay.
And these help fight off whatever the threat is.
So that's a crucial part of the immune response.
Exactly.
It's like a double-edged sword.
It is, because when microglia stay activated for too long, it's like the alarm keeps blaring
Right.
even after the danger has passed.
Yeah.
This chronic inflammation
Yeah.
can actually damage brain cells.
Wow.
And this can contribute to conditions like depression and neurodegenerative diseases.
So in these conditions,
Yeah.
like, those microglia are stuck in overdrive
They are.
and just wreaking havoc in the brain.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so this is where psychedelics come back into the picture.
Okay.
Research suggests that by interacting with the 5-HT2A receptor, psychedelics can actually modulate
Oh.
the activity of microglia.
Wait, so they can, like, talk these immune cells down from their frenzy?
Yes, exactly.
It's like they're whispering, everything's okay.
Yeah.
You can relax now.
That's a great analogy.
It's like everything is fine.
Studies have shown that psychedelics might actually reduce the production of those really harmful pro-inflammatory cytokines, and they might even increase the production of the anti-inflammatory one.
That's really interesting.
So it's like they're restoring the balance
Yeah.
to the brain's immune system.
It's like psychedelics are helping to retune the immune response
Yes.
and making it more harmonious.
Exactly.
But is this all just like theory, or is there actual evidence?
There's growing evidence from both preclinical and clinical studies.
Okay.
For example, there have been studies on mice
Okay.
that are lacking a specific protein called vorarestin-2,
Right.
which interacts with that 5-HT2A receptor, remember?
Right, right.
And they've shown some very interesting results.
Like what?
Well, these mice, they exhibit
Yeah.
an exaggerated head twitch response
Okay.
to certain psychedelics.
Head twitch response? What is that?
Yeah, so it's a behavioral marker
Yep.
that researchers often use
Yeah.
to assess the activity of those serotonin receptors, and particularly that 5-HT2A receptor.
Okay.
And so this exaggerated response in these mice
Right.
suggests that there's this complex interplay
Okay.
between these receptors and
Yeah.
behavior, right?
Yeah.
And it offers clues about how psychedelics are influencing both.
Okay, so by studying these mice
Right.
and their
Interesting little quirks.
Yeah, they're interesting quirks. Researchers can start to unravel exactly
the role of the 5-HT2A receptor in both psychedelic experiences and inflammation.
Exactly. And these findings could have huge implications
Yeah.
for understanding how psychedelics could potentially treat those conditions that we were talking about.
Right.
Depression, neurodegenerative diseases.
Yeah.
Both of which involve chronic inflammation.
This is all making sense now.
Good.
So we've got these overactive microglia
Right.
causing problems in the brain.
Yep.
And then the psychedelics come in,
They do.
bind to that 5-HT2A receptor,
Yep.
and they somehow calm those microglia down,
Exactly.
potentially reducing inflammation
Yes.
and leading to all these therapeutic benefits.
That's a great summary.
Awesome.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, I bet.
There's still so much more to learn about how all these interactions work.
I can only imagine.
Right.
My mind is already buzzing with possibilities.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
But before we get too carried away, I gotta ask.
How does all of this compare to cannabis?
Oh, that's a good question.
I know it has anti-inflammatory properties too, right?
It does.
So are they working in similar ways?
That's an important question.
Yeah.
So while both cannabinoids and psychedelics show promise in how they're able to modulate the immune system, they actually take different routes to get there.
This is getting juicy.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
All right. Well, cannabinoids, they primarily interact with the endocannabinoid system, which is involved in a whole range of physiological processes, including mood, pain, and of course, inflammation.
Right, the endocannabinoid system.
Yes.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's like our body's own built-in cannabis system.
So both cannabinoids and psychedelics influence inflammation.
Yes.
But they work through different pathways.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even within the class of psychedelics, there is a lot of diversity in how they work.
Like, what? Give me an example.
Okay, we'll take salvinorin A. The active compound found in Salvia divinorum. Now, it is a psychedelic, but it works through a completely different receptor system.
Interesting.
It works through the opioid receptor system.
Wow, a psychedelic that goes for the opioid system?
Yes.
That's fascinating.
So even though we lump these substances together as psychedelics, they can have very different effects on the brain and body. So understanding these nuances is crucial for developing safe and effective treatments.
It's clear that the world of psychedelics is far more complex than I ever imagined.
It really is.
We've gone from receptor interactions and brain inflammation to exploring all the diversity within the psychedelic class itself. And it seems like we're just scratching the surface of their therapeutic potential.
It's a really exciting time.
What other fascinating insights await us?
Well, let's see. It is, and with all this talk about psychedelics as potential medicines.
You know, I know a lot of people are probably wondering, like, how do they actually stack up against existing anti-inflammatory drugs?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
So we've been focusing on how psychedelics work on receptors and microglia. But how is that actually different from how the traditional anti-inflammatories work?
Right. So many of those conventional anti-inflammatories, they actually target enzymes that are involved in that inflammatory process. They essentially block those enzymes to reduce inflammation. But, you know, that can sometimes lead to unwanted side effects.
So it's like using a sledgehammer. You really just need a scalpel.
Right. Psychedelics, on the other hand, seem to work more upstream. They're modulating the activity of those microglia we talked about. So they're not completely shutting down the inflammatory response.
Interesting.
But they're more like fine-tuning it.
That sounds much more nuanced.
Like, psychedelics are working with the body's natural defenses. Instead of just suppressing them.
Exactly.
Could this be why we see fewer side effects with psychedelics?
It's possible.
Than the traditional anti-inflammatories?
That's certainly a possibility. And it's an area of active research. You know, we need more clinical trials to really fully understand the long-term safety profile of these substances. But the initial findings are promising.
It is really exciting to think that psychedelics could offer a more targeted approach and potentially safer to managing inflammation. But let's shift gears for a minute. We've been talking a lot about the science, but I'm curious about the actual experience of psychedelic therapy. What's it like for patients?
Well, it's important to remember that psychedelic therapy is not just about taking a drug.
Okay.
It's a very carefully guided process that involves extensive preparation.
Support during the psychedelic session?
Yeah.
And integration of the experience afterwards.
So it's not like popping a pill
Right.
and expecting instant results.
Exactly.
There's a whole therapeutic journey
There is, yeah.
involved.
Absolutely. The therapist plays such a crucial role in creating a safe and supportive environment.
Okay.
Helping the patient navigate what can often be profound and sometimes very challenging experiences that can arise during a psychedelic session.
I imagine that requires a lot of trust and rapport.
It does.
Between the patient and therapist.
Absolutely, yeah. The therapist acts as a guide, a compassionate witness, and a facilitator of healing.
Wow, that's a powerful combination.
Right, and they help the patient explore all the insights and emotions that can emerge during that psychedelic experience.
Okay.
And help integrate those insights back into everyday life.
Wow, it sounds like a really powerful partnership.
It is. With the psychedelic acting as like a catalyst for personal growth and the therapist serving as a guide on that journey. But with all this talk about psychedelics as potential treatments. What types of conditions are actually being explored?
Right. Well, a variety of conditions are being investigated. But there's a lot of excitement right now around their potential for treatment-resistant depression and anxiety disorders.
So these are cases where the conventional therapies haven't really provided enough relief, treatment-resistant depression. That's a huge unmet need.
It is, and it's a big focus of research right now.
So what does the research actually say about psychedelics for these conditions?
Well, it's still early days,
Okay.
but several small clinical trials have shown some promising results, especially with psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms.
Right.
And some studies suggest that psilocybin, when used in conjunction with therapy, can actually lead to really significant and sustained reductions in depressive symptoms.
Psilocybin for depression?
Yeah.
It's just amazing to think that something found in nature could offer such profound relief.
I know, it's pretty remarkable.
How does it actually work, though?
Yeah.
Is it solely due to those anti-inflammatory effects?
Well, while the anti-inflammatory effects probably play a role, there are probably other mechanisms at work as well.
Like what?
Well, researchers are exploring how psilocybin might be influencing brain connectivity, promoting neuroplasticity, and even facilitating emotional processing.
So it's like this multi-pronged approach.
Exactly.
With psilocybin working on all these different levels to alleviate depression. It's incredible to think that these substances could actually reshape our brain's wiring and rewrite the narrative
Powerful stuff.
of our mental health.
It really is groundbreaking research, and we're really only just beginning to understand the full scope of their therapeutic potential.
Wow. This deep dive has already been packed.
I know,
with so much information. From the microscopic world of receptors and microglia to the frontiers of psychedelic therapy.
It's amazing.
It's clear that these substances hold immense potential.
They do.
Both for understanding the human mind and for alleviating suffering.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up, I have a few more questions about the practical aspects of psychedelic therapy.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions you've got.
Well, one thing that's been on my mind is accessibility.
Okay.
We've talked about all these potential benefits. But who can actually access these treatments?
That's a really important question. And unfortunately, accessibility is a major challenge right now. Psychedelic therapy is still very much in its early stages. And it's not widely available. Most clinical trials have really strict inclusion criteria. And there are very few treatment centers offering these therapies outside of those research settings.
So it's not as simple as just going to my doctor and getting a prescription for psilocybin.
No, not yet, unfortunately.
Okay.
A big hurdle is the legal status of these substances.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah. In many countries, psychedelics are still classified as Schedule I drugs.
Okay.
Which means they have a high potential for abuse.
Right.
And no currently accepted medical use.
It seems like a catch-22. We need more research.
It is, yeah.
To prove the medical value.
Right.
But the current legal status makes it hard to do the research.
Exactly. But thankfully, there is growing momentum for change. You know, we're seeing increasing evidence of their therapeutic potential.
Right.
And there's a growing movement advocating for their responsible use.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a shift in public perception and policy. Several cities and states have decriminalized certain psychedelics.
That's interesting.
And there's growing pressure
to
reschedule these substances at the federal level.
That's encouraging.
It is.
But even if these legal barriers are lifted, I imagine there are still challenges to widespread accessibility.
Yeah, like cost.
Yeah, cost for sure.
And the training required for therapists.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Psychedelic therapy requires specialized training for therapists.
Okay.
And that can be time-consuming and expensive.
Right.
And even with the proper training, the time and resources required to conduct these therapies responsibly mean that they're likely to be costly for patients.
Sounds like we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Before these treatments are truly accessible to everyone who could benefit.
Right.
But it feels like we're witnessing this big paradigm shift.
I think so, too.
In how we view and utilize psychedelics.
We're
moving away from fear and stigma.
Definitely.
Toward a more nuanced understanding of these powerful tools.
Right. And as research continues and we keep unraveling these mysteries, we can expect even more fascinating insights and potentially groundbreaking treatments in the years to come.
This deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
We've traveled from the world of receptors.
That's quite a journey.
And microglia.
I know, right?
To the frontiers of psychedelic therapy.
It is amazing.
And these substances hold so much potential.
Yeah.
Both for helping us understand the human mind.
Yeah.
And for alleviating suffering.
Absolutely.
But like with any powerful tool.
Right.
Responsible use and careful research are paramount.
They are.
We need to make sure we're harnessing the healing power of these substances while also minimizing the risks.
Exactly.
It's a delicate dance.
It is.
Between scientific exploration and those ethical considerations.
Yeah, well said.
Awesome.
Perhaps one final thought for our listeners to think about.
Okay, I like it.
If psychedelics can help us break free from rigid thought patterns, and explore new perspectives, what other possibilities might they unlock?
Oh, wow.
Could they help us inspire creativity or foster empathy or even help us address larger societal challenges?
That's powerful.
The potential seems limitless.
Yeah.
And the journey, it's really just begun.
That is some serious food for thought.
It is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring.
Yeah.
Keep questioning.
Yes.
And keep those minds expanding.
Absolutely.